the 10 working principles for a healthy society. Principle number 1, be who you are on purpose.
So what is it I want you to get out of this? I want you to get out of this fill in the blank series an edge. I want you to get an edge in your life. And here's the first edge I want you to get. I want you to be able to figure out who you are and how you got to be who you are, where you are. Now think about that. You know what you do. You know what your job is. You're a mom, you're a dad, but you're a baker, a candlestick maker, you're an accountant or an architect or a teacher. That's what you do. That's not who you are. So I want you to know who you are, and more importantly, how you got to be there. And I'm going to tell you how we're going to figure this out. All right, now to help you figure out that distinction, I've got to give you some tools to do that, okay? The first thing I'm going to ask you to do is move your position. To understand what I mean by that, I want you to fill this sentence in for me. How would you complete this sentence? I would rather be right than blank. Think about that. I'd rather be right than blank. Now, I guarantee you 90% plus of you finished that sentence this way. You said, I'd rather be right than wrong. Of course, you'd rather be right than wrong. Nobody wants to be wrong. If you're in an argument or you're picking out something, you always want to be right. So you'd finish that sentence, I'd rather be right than wrong. I want you to move your position just for the time that you're listening to me today and for the rest of this Living by Design series. What I want you to do is think about it differently. I want you to finish the sentence this way. I don't want you to say, I'd rather be right than wrong. What I want you to say is, I would rather be happy than right. Now, that's very different. I would rather be happy than right. Look, we have enough right fighters. We got enough people out there that are right. They're always right, always got to be right. God, don't you get sick of those people that are right all the time. I don't want you to be one of those. I don't want you to be right. I want you to be happy. I mean, you might get in an argument with your kid and say, get a haircut, no tattoos, shut up, do what I tell you. You may be right because you're the parent, but does it make you happy? Does it make your family happy? So I'm going to ask you to move your position just for the time we're talking. Instead of being so committed to being right, in terms of evaluating everything I talk to you about in terms of whether what I'm telling you is right or wrong, what I want to ask you to do is look at it in terms of whether what I'm telling you makes you happy. Now, when I say move your position, what do I mean by that? Think about it. I can say, okay, stand at the hood of your car. Now move to the trunk of your car. That's moving your position. That's what I want you to do in your attitude, your mind. I actually want you to move your position. Now, what do you have to do to affect this change from being right to being happy? Well, let's call roll, because I want everybody here that needs to be there in order for this to happen. And I got some good news and some bad news. It's a short list. Because the good news is the only person you need to make this change is you. The bad news is the only person you need to make this change is you. Now, why is that bad news? Because you can't blame anybody. You're not a victim. You can't say, well, my wife's got to change. My husband's got... No, they don't. No, they don't. They can do whatever they want to do. You have to be the one that changes your attitude. Maybe they'll change, maybe they won't. But when I call roll on who needs to be involved for you to stop being right and start being happy, you're the only one that's involved. You're the only one that you control. And doesn't that work out well? You're the only one you need to control to change from being right to being happy. So let's just get this right. If you're going to live by design, the design is for you. Everybody else you can inspire. I mean, you can get them all excited. Maybe they want to follow you, maybe they don't. But the only person you control is you. So let's clean your house first. We'll worry about everybody else later. By the way, that's always been the case. You have always been the only person you've ever controlled, and you have been doing it on purpose. You may not have thought you were, but you have always done this on purpose. Lori Gottlieb is a psychotherapist. She's a New York Times best-selling author. And in addition to her clinical practice, she's co-host of the popular Dear Therapist podcast, which is produced by my good friend Katie Couric. She also writes the Atlantic's weekly Dear Therapist advice column. We shoot in Hollywood, as you know, having been here. I ask people a lot, if you were going to write a script for the rest of your life, what would you want it to be? You know what you're living, you know what you're suffering, but if you were just king or queen of the forest and you could write the script for the rest of your life, what would it be? And it is very sad to see that they have a really difficult time envisioning being the star in their own life. Who's going to star in your life if it's not you? And they really have a hard time putting together a vision where they're the star in their own life.
Because nobody has ever asked them that. Nobody has ever said, you are the protagonist of your own life. How would you like this story to go? Most people have never thought about their own lives that way. They don't realize how much agency they actually have. And I think that's one of the most empowering things about asking yourself these questions. In my TED Talk, I get up on the stage and I say, we're all going to die. That's something that I say to people. And I find that it really motivates people to know that life has 100% mortality rate. It's not for other people. Every single one of us is going to die. What do you want to do with your time here? And I think when people are really aware of that, not in a morbid way, but in a way that feels like I need to live with intentionality. When I wake up every day, am I living with intention? Am I living the kind of life that aligns with my values, that aligns with the kind of life I want to have? And if I'm not, what can I do differently? And what's keeping me from doing that?
You've got to be who you are on purpose. I love that you talk to people about that and challenge them to write this up, figure out how they want to be in a new narrative and do what they want to do. And it's not about abandoning their lives. You don't have to leave everything. You just change the way you are. You're not going to drop your kids off at the mall and say, I want a new life, and just leave them there. But you can do it differently within the confines of your life.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a woman that I write about in the book who is about to turn 70 and feels like that, kind of the runway is behind her and she doesn't know what she can change at this point. And she goes through extraordinary change. So I think it's never too late to change. And I feel like it's being really aware of how we're living our lives is important at any age. It's not just, let's look at the runway behind us. I think, we should be teaching that to our kids. Live with intention, be clear about what you want, who you are, what is authentic to you, the kinds of relationships you want to have with others, the kind of relationship you want to have to yourself. That's important for all of us. And that's what I think you and I are both trying to do in our work. I also feel like people have the answers. They just don't necessarily have access to them. And our job is to help them access the answers that they already have.
We're seeing spikes in depression, anxiety, loneliness with our kids. We're seeing adults that are intimidated by what they used to take for granted in terms of social interaction and the competition of career. I think people thought when the quarantine was lifted, it was going to be like that scene from Greece when it was the last day of school and those doors flew open and they all ran out into the carnival and everybody was dancing and singing like, oh, it's over, we're free. And it hasn't been that way at all. A lot of people are feeling trepidation and resisting a little bit, having fear, getting back into things that once was like falling off a log. What do you think people need to say to themselves as they transition back into a fully functioning world?
Well, I think that people have to realize that we've all been through a big change and everybody has reacted differently and everybody's had different circumstances. And I think we need to allow for that. I think that, we've talked about this collective trauma, but it's been different for different people. And so, and people are going to have different feelings about what it means to transition to something that feels more normal, but isn't quite normal because COVID is still here. So I think it's really important just to allow for people to have their experiences, not judge people for what they're experiencing, not fight with them about, they need to feel a certain way because you feel a certain way. And just, I think if the pandemic taught us anything, it's about, we need to have more compassion for one another.
Pastor James Ward says that the core conviction to overcome is the first step to shifting from victim to zero victim thinking. So we're going to talk about Pastor James' book, Zero Victim, Overcoming Injustice with a New Attitude, and ways we can get out of victimhood. And when I say get out of victimhood, it really is an escape, because this can be a prison that we get caught in our lives. It can be a way of looking at things. It can be a lifestyle. It can be an attitude of approach to how we live our lives. I think Pastor James has really identified something that I think can be outcome determinative in a person's life. I didn't read you in the book as being a denier at all, being naive at all, seeing the world through rose-colored glasses at all, or asking your reader to do the same. In fact, I read you as saying, this is real, this happens, so you better get ready for it and check your mind. In fact, you say in the book that people with a victimhood mentality are undisciplined thinkers, I think is how you referred to it, as undisciplined thinkers. You're not checking your thinking. You're letting somebody else control your thinking. You're not being disciplined in your thinking.
Undisciplined emotionally.
Right.
I talk about that as well, which I think is a conversation that's not happening. And I just want to be clear, we're not being condescending to people at all. But I think that people who are undisciplined emotionally are all over the nation right now. I think that this is the problem. I don't think that times are getting harder. I think people are getting weaker in some situations. I think that we're not conditioning and tempering our hearts and our minds to deal with the things that we're facing off with. Victim mentality right now, it's like being in a maximum security prison with no walls. And now all of a sudden we're creating safe spaces and all these kinds of things for people to retreat to, because we're not building better people. We're not tempering our emotional thresholds, in the workforce. I mean, we'll check a resume. Where'd you go to school? How did you score on the LSAT, the GMAT, the GRE? But we're not checking emotionally, are people tempered and strong from an emotional standpoint? And so I just think it's a quotient that's not being addressed. We're silent on the issue in society, and we're seeing victim thinking is now becoming the soil from which all of the division, all of the political vitriol, all of the hatred, all of the exasperated racism and the conflagration of emotions in our nation is all growing from the soil, the very fertile soil of victim thinking. And not just in the area of race. I deal with women who have been molested, who've gone through situations where they've been abused. We deal with folks who are dealing with divorce and have gone through bankruptcy. In any situation, victim thinking, it becomes like a maximum security prison with no walls. And my heart is to see people free, to see people liberated, to live in the dignity, to live out the fullness of God's call for their life. And it has everything to do with their perspective and how they manage the emotions. I say that emotions now have become, I use the term emotional EWMDs, emotional weapons of mass destruction. And I think we're seeing that on a cataclysmic scale in our nation right now.
Let me say very clearly, he is not denying that there is systemic racism. He is not denying that there are people out there that will victimize you. He is not denying that there are circumstances or situations that will prey upon you and that you don't have a choice about that. What he's saying is you have a complete choice about what you do about it, what you say to yourself about it, whether you put it on and wear it like a coat, or whether you throw it off and say, I'm going to choose how I react to this. Fair statement?
Very, very fair, accurate. Zero victim thinking is preventative. It's preemptive. I use an analogy to describe how victim thinking works, and I use the analogy of baseball. And I like to say that the pitcher is a really, really bad guy because he throws this object that's rock hard at 100 miles an hour at this other guy behind home plate. That's not a nice thing to do. And let's just say that the catcher now on the receiving end of this projectile, this life-threatening projectile that's coming his way, if he is unprotected, unaware, and unprepared, he could easily lose his life with a baseball being thrown at him at 100 miles an hour. But because he prepares, because he preconditions his mind, he takes the proper stance, he puts on the right protective equipment, he stretches out his hand in anticipation of the pitch that's coming his way. And what was potentially a life-threatening situation has now become America's favorite pastime. It's a sport to him. Why? Because he manages the problem that is coming. That is how I describe the necessity of preconditioning your mind to develop a zero victim mindset. The pitches are going to come. The victimization is going to come through relationships, through the work experience. This is something universal. The only qualification you need to be victimized is to be born. It happens to people all over. I talked to a number of folks who are immigrants from other countries who are saying, you don't understand victimization in America when you haven't had a tyrannical government and a dictator. And so it's part of life. The world is a hostile place. But again, the way that we prepare and precondition our minds to deal with those things determine whether or not they have effect on us at all. And that is my encouragement. You mentioned the power of attitude and why I acknowledge the internal discipline, the emotional discipline that's needed. I'll use another analogy. You know, I love college football. I love Alabama football. You know what? It makes me happy when my team wins. But if my team loses, I'm unhappy about it, but it doesn't rob me of my joy. My joy is separate and independent from whether or not my team wins or loses. So I'm happy if my team wins and I'm joyful. But if my team loses, I'm unhappy. But that doesn't mean I'm unjoyful. What's the difference? Happiness is a result based upon external circumstances, but joy is an internal, unchangeable reality. The same thing is true with freedom. The same thing is true with zero victim thinking. We got to build better people and equip people. I think this should be taught in the school systems. I think it should be taught in churches, that we've got to help folks be equipped to face off with the challenges that we're all facing, and really begin to kind of put this in the right framework.
When I say that these are toxic personalities, it doesn't mean they're evil human beings. It doesn't mean that they're second-class citizens. It just means that their level of adjustment is such that they're toxic in your life. I'm not asking you to say, I'm putting myself in a position where I'm better than these people or I'm sitting in judgment of them. I'm just saying protect yourself. And let me give you an example. I think life is largely about intentions. I mean, doesn't it matter when somebody does something? Don't you want to know what their intention was? Think about this. If somebody's backing out of the driveway and you're standing there and they run over and crush your foot, if they did it on purpose, they saw you standing there, they were upset with you, they swerved the car over and crushed your foot on purpose, that's different than if they didn't see you and it was purely an accident. Does it matter that one had a bad intent and the other didn't have a bad intent at all? Yes, it does make a difference. However, your foot is just as crushed either way, right? Your foot is crushed just as bad either way. Now, I had a friend in my life when I was growing up, and this guy I'm telling you, it was like he had a cloud over his head. It just seemed like drama followed him around. No matter what happened, no matter where we went, it just seemed like something bad always happened. Something got broken, a fight broke out, conflict. We could be at the Y swimming. Before you know it, he's involved in somebody hitting their head on the diving board. Did he push him? No, but was he involved? Yes. We would ride our motorcycles and there would be a crash. I mean, did he crash the other motorcycles? No. But was he involved in the crash? Yes. It was like he was always in the middle of catastrophe. Now, here's the thing. And my mother said this to me real clearly. She said, look, he's a good kid. There's no question about it. But I'm telling you, you hang around with him. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. It's not a matter of if you're going to get caught up and be in the crash, be in the drama, get in the fight. It's a matter of when it's going to happen, not if. Doesn't mean he's a bad person. It just seems to follow him around. Now, it would be indiscreet for me to say his name, JoJo, and she was right. He's been a friend forever, but somehow or another, JoJo just seems to attract this stuff. He could be sitting alone in a chair, and somehow or another, the leg would break and a splinter would fly in somebody's eye and a fight would break. Something would happen. I've asked you to do an audit, and I'm not asking you to sit in judgment. I'm just asking you to acknowledge, do you have these people in your life? And if you do, whether the intent is there or whether it's not, you have to make up your mind as to whether or not you're willing to put yourself at risk or whether you're not. You know, Maslow says that we have a hierarchy of needs, and, you know, first is survival. And until we have that covered, we're not interested in much else. But when we have all of these different things covered, then we start thinking about actualization, where we start thinking about helping other people, giving to other people. Maybe you're at that point where you want to define your uniqueness in what you can do for other people. I'm just saying, I'm not trying to tell you what your currency is. I'm asking you to define what your currency is. And once you decide, okay, I know what my image is. I know who I am. And part of that image is the right to set up boundaries and get these toxic people out of my life. It doesn't matter whether they meant well or not. They're not working for me. It's not helping me in the pursuit of healthy goals. These people, maybe they'll work for somebody else. They don't work for me. Our chemistry isn't right. We don't click. Maybe they're just bad intent people, and you damn sure need to get rid of them. But you have the right to control your relationships and get people out of your life. That's part of your image. Control your relationships. Some people say, oh, I don't want to talk to this person because when you say hello, it's going to be an hour. You know what? If that's true, you're not running your own life. Because you should be able to say, hey, it was good seeing you. Sorry, I can't visit right now. I got to go. And they go, oh, well, and get offended. Well, then let them get offended. If you need to go to pick up your kids, you don't need to hide in a broom closet when you see this person coming because they yammer on forever. Take control of your life. Don't hide. When you see them, say hi. They go, oh, I'm so glad to see you. I need to tell you something. Hold that thought. I don't have time to visit right now. I need to go pick up my kids, so I will see you later. Control your own relationships. Don't be a victim. That's part of this image I'm wanting you to take control of your life. Part of your image is you have the right to set boundaries. You have the right to control your relationships. You have the right to get these toxic people out of your life. That's very, very important. That's part of your image. Part of your image is deciding what it is that's unique about you. Part of your image is deciding what your currency is. And then once you know those things, and you say, okay, he wants me to star in my own life, what's my plan?